Grab a glass of the good stuff and a comfy chair. A swig of branding is ready to pour. Good stuff. We're going to talk specifically in this lesson about a branding audit. How to know if it's time to rework your brand. Of course, if you don't have an identity yet, which is another word for brand, then it's obviously time to take a look at creating one. A brand is a living thing, and branding should never stop. A brand, it's somewhat of an intangible. It's really what exists in the minds of your audience. Your brand is not so much what you think you are, it's what they think you are. You essentially have an intrinsic brand, which is who you know you are. It's your company culture, it's everything you stand for. And then there's your manifest brand, which is what people think you are. So what we want to do is not lose your identity, but express it in a way that influences people to the place where you want them to be. What is a brand identity? Well, oftentimes people think of a brand as a logo, and that is a part of it. Logo, name, tagline, those are all important elements. But really, your brand is every touch point, every communication you have. It's the culture, it's the personality, it's the tone of your whole company. The way your employees answer the phone is part of your brand. The advertisements you create are part of your brand. I'd like to share a quote with you. A brand is no longer what we tell the consumer it is what consumers tell each other that it is. Your brand really is affected by social media, the instant feedback, what people are telling each other with ratings. So this is a very important point to remember. Another quote that I really like is, "Be where the world is going." So a brand has to be contemporary and timeless, but it also has to be forward-looking. Your brand really needs to respond to how people are talking and what their preferences are, and those preferences are always evolving. David Ogilvy said, "You now have to decide what image you want for your brand." Image means personality. Products, like people, have personalities, and they can make or break them in the marketplace. So your company can be made or broken by how your brand comes across. What emotions does your current brand evoke? Are those emotions in concert with who you are and with what you want to portray? So, for instance, on a scale of almost slapstick and silly to very, very serious, where do you land? It's a good idea to ask some people what their impressions are. Ask your social media audience, what do you think of our brand? How does this make you feel? Pay attention to comments and ratings that people are putting out there. Another question is, what's the big idea? What is the big idea behind your brand? Is there something that's going to motivate people? A strong benefit, a strong motivation for people to want to choose your brand. So one of the main purposes of a brand is to give people something they can identify with. And actually, people have so many choices these days. Think about going into the grocery store and you have sometimes dozens or more choices in front of you. There are thousands and thousands of brands in your typical grocery store. What a brand does is, if people identify with it, if it has a big idea behind it, it takes away the anxiety of having to choose among the many, many options that are out there. So brands are sort of short code for people to identify with something and say, "Oh, I know this, I'm familiar with this." If you go to a town you're not used to and you see little coffee kiosks, you're not going to know what the quality is. But if you see a Starbucks, you're instantly going to know, hey, I know the quality of this coffee. It's maybe not gourmet, but I know what it's going to be. I know the experience that I'm going to get. So that Starbucks brand, immediately people see that from the road, and it makes an emotional connection, and that's important. Another quote, "It takes a big idea to attract the attention of consumers and get them to buy your product. Unless your advertising contains a big idea, it will pass like a ship in the night." I doubt if more than one campaign in 100 contains a big idea. And that's, again, David Ogilvy with that quote. So having a big idea, having a reason for people to choose your brand over others is very important. Another important question to ask when you're doing a brand audit and determining if you need to brand or rebrand is your brand contemporary, or is it modern, or is it out of date like the Thigh Master? You want something contemporary, something that is adaptable, that really works with today's audience. So I see a lot of logos, for example, that are outdated. I see some names that possibly could use some tweaking, some taglines that could use updating. And as a general rule of thumb, your logo should stay pretty constant, pretty static for a number of years. It's an intangible. It's hard to know how often you want to refresh your logo or change it. Your company name usually isn't going to change very much over time unless, say, you've got a new partnership or you have a really new focus. Then you really want to do a campaign, a concerted, well thought out campaign to announce the name change. A tagline can change pretty often. It can change yearly, it can change every couple years. It just depends on what you're wanting to focus on, because name, tagline, and logo together should express the most crucial elements of your culture, your personality and tone, and your major benefits that you offer. To think creatively, said George Neller, we must be able to look afresh at what we normally take for granted. So it's easy for us to take our brand identity for granted, that it's worked for years, it should work now. The question you have to ask is, if you refresh your brand, are you gaining more than you lose? Are you staying current with people, staying more contemporary? And oftentimes the core of your brand identity doesn't have to change. It just shows that you're keeping up with the times. Marketing's job is never done, says Beth Comstock. It's about perpetual motion. We must continue to innovate every day. So you really have to keep your finger on the pulse. And that's much easier in today's environment because you have social media, you have ratings, you have Yelp that show you directly what people are thinking. Another point, is your brand simple? Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Guess who said that? It was Leonardo da Vinci. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, and that's very, very true. Your brand identity, your logo should be clean, your name should be understandable, your tagline should be memorable, and we're going to cover all of those elements in the next few lessons. How to write a good tagline, how to write a good name, and not necessarily that you'd want to do those yourselves, but at least you understand the process. So keep it simple. It is very important in today's environment because people see as many as 4,000 ads a day. And you might think, well, I'm competing with people in my industry. Yes, you are, but you're also competing with all the other messages out there. And we all develop out of necessity cognitive filters which help us survive, because if we were to even be able to take in all the information that's sent our way, it would overfill our minds and it would drive us crazy. So we just naturally, unthinkingly put up cognitive filters. And it's simple, creative, strong, focused ideas that can break through those cognitive filters. And this is why branding takes a lot of strategy. It's a lot of work. It's very much more than a brainstorm, and we'll talk about those types of things later. Simplicity is the keynote of all true elegance. Coco Chanel said that. Simplicity is elegance. It's sophistication. Really, when we're branding, we go through several iterations of a brand, and we see, and it's the same with advertising, how little can we get away with? Ads used to be very text heavy. Now, ads are much more simple, image driven, few words, but very impactful words. David Ogilvy said, don't bunt. Aim out of the park, aim for the company of immortals. And this is very, very true in how you express your brand. If your brand isn't making your company immortal, if it's not making your company the one to beat and inspiring people, then it is time to think about a brand audit. That's it for now. We've reached the bottom of the glass. Join us next week for more timeless tips for top shelf marketing.